Well, a very warm welcome to All Saints Church this evening. My name is Sarah Jones. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here. It's an absolute pleasure for us to host this hosting event this evening. Some say that church and politics don't go together, but we love Marlow, and so we care about what happens here and in our wider nation too. And God longs for all people to flourish, and we're privileged to live in a democracy here in the UK. Desmond Tutu once said, "When people tell me that the Bible has nothing to do with politics, I ask them, which Bible are you talking about?" And so we're really pleased to have 7 candidates here this evening, all who are standing for election to represent us in Parliament. Just one candidate isn't able to be here. That's Catherine Harker from the Social Democratic Party. Thank you all very much for coming. Thank you for all that you're going to share. You may not know it, but we pray for all of you and all who stand for office every week in this building. And so we're really glad this evening to get to know you all just a little bit better. And we want to honour your different contributions. And we are obviously absolutely delighted as well to have Andrea Catherwood here this evening as our moderator. Anthea, as you all know, is an award-winning radio and television broadcaster and foreign correspondent. And she's going to be part of the BBC's General Election Night presenting team. So it's Marlow. We get to have her first. Isn't that brilliant? This evening is being recorded and will be on YouTube later. And so with no further ado, I'm going to hand over to Andrea. Thank you all so much.
What a lovely introduction. Thank you very much indeed. It's a real pleasure to be here and lovely to see so many people here. The church is packed on a sunny night, so thank you very much indeed for coming. I also live here in the constituency, so I'm also very keen to hear what everybody has to say. Before I introduce you to the candidates, it might be a good idea if I just explain to you a little bit about how the evening is going to work. Each candidate in a few minutes' time will get to make an opening speech. Then I know that many of you have already sent in questions. I know there's been over 100 questions sent in. So the organisers have done their best to make sure that the questions that I have here tonight will be representative of the questions that have been sent in. So they've chosen the topics that received the most questions and then chosen one question that tries to represent that. I will put those questions to the candidates, and they will have, I'm afraid, quite a short time to answer each one of them because we do want to get through as many as possible. Just so you know, this isn't a debate. It isn't an interview. I'm not going to interrogate the candidates. I'm not going to go back to them. And I won't interrupt, and I will try and keep them to time. That's the only thing. And after I've done that, the second part of the evening will be a chance to hear from you on the floor. So you may have come with a question tonight. You may hear something that you would like to ask more about. We would be delighted if we heard from any first-time voters, if there are any in the audience as well. So we will have people going around with roving mics, and we will try again to get through as many questions as possible. And then at the end, each of the candidates will have a few moments to sum up. So if I could introduce you now to the candidates. First of all, right beside me, we've got Pippa Allen, who is an independent. Next to her is Cole Caesar, another independent. Then we've got Anna Crabtree, who is from the Liberal Democrats. John Halsall, who is Reform UK. Then we've got Joy Morrissey from the Conservative Party. Next to her is Matthew Patterson from the Labour Party. And at the end is Dominic Pegram from the Green Party. Now, in the interest of transparency, I will say that I think the candidates were told yesterday what the question areas will be, but they haven't seen the questions. They don't know the questions in advance. So because of that, I'm going to alternate who I ask the first question to, so that perhaps some of the other ones have got a little bit more thinking time, and we'll just try to be as equitable as possible. So let me kick off with the first question, and that is on social care, and it's one of many questions that was received on the subject of social care. And this one comes from Ayala Willinson. And the question... I'm so terribly sorry. It's a good job you're here. Why don't we start at the end, Dominic, and if you can start with your introduction.
Can everyone hear me? I prefer to stand up. No? You'll be doing the point. No, but I kind of like... Anyway, okay. I'll sit down. Good evening, everyone. I am Dominic Pegram. I live in Jordan. Lived there for 15 years. And I am the Green candidate. So I've been thinking, why am I here? Well, I believe that the main parties have got us collectively wrong. I believe that, given the choice, we would all give a little bit more, if we could afford it, if it meant that the National Health Service provided for us from birth and as we move into older age. I believe that there are some things that are better in our own hands, not motivated by profit, but by an obligation to provide clean water, cheaper and better public transport, and more affordable homes for our children. I also believe that if I was lucky enough to be a multi-millionaire, I'd be proud to pay a little bit more taxation if it meant that those who aren't as lucky as I am could have a life of dignity and live in a fairer and safer Britain. I also believe that we collectively understand the impact of climate change, and that unless we do something, the impact will be catastrophic. I also believe, and I'm milking this, I also believe that if the Hustings were tomorrow night, I would be in the pub watching the football. Now, why would you vote for the Green Party? People often have asked me, and they said, is that a wasted vote? And my response is, my role here is to remind the major parties that when they make a decision and when they have an opinion, they should have the climate, nature, and social justice at their core. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me. My name is Matt Patterson. I'm the Labour Party candidate, standing to be your MP. I think we can agree on one thing, which is I'm afraid if it was on tomorrow, I'll be watching football as well, but that's fine. I guess I want to talk to you about why I'm standing. And I just want to thank, first of all Saints for holding us here. This is a church that I've come to some amazing weddings in. It's a church that I kind of know a little bit because my brother's kids go to the school attached to this church, and also because he comes here a little bit, and it's just great to be in a place that that if it's not my home, at least feels friendly, so thank you for having us. The reason I'm standing is that I'm local, and I understand the challenges that we face in this area. South Bucks is my home. I live in Amersham, but I've got family right across South Bucks and all across the towns and villages, and I grew up here. I mean, these woods, the streams, the rivers, the pubs, the town centres, this is the place I'm from. This is my home as much as it's your home. And it's a place I'm raising my family in. And I'm standing because not only am I local, but I'm experienced. I've worked at the highest level of government. I worked for Alistair Darling in an incredibly challenging situation at the Treasury when we fought to save the economy, to protect the livelihoods of people across this country. I've worked overseas. I worked in Burma during the Rohingya genocide, which is an incredibly challenging situation. And most recently, I worked at the Commonwealth as we fought to protect our small states against climate change. It's not words, we fought to protect the smallest, most vulnerable states in the world from the impact of climate change. And I think the other reason I'm standing is we need change. Here, as many of you will know, we've had blue for a very long time. You've got a Tory council, you've got a Tory member of parliament, you've got a Conservative government. Now, Joy will tell you that she's been fighting for you. Yet, as long as anyone can remember, this place has been Conservative. So I guess, while Joy might tell you that she's been fighting for you, who's she been fighting? Her friends in the local council? You know, her mates in the government? Has she been fighting herself? You know, I have an incredibly challenging family situation. My son has really profound disabilities. He's 5, he's a happy kid, and we love him, but he will need care for the rest of his life. He's blind, he's deaf, he's fed through a peg, we use a wheelchair. He is profoundly disabled. If this country fails, if the NHS stops working, if social care doesn't work, because the Tory government runs it down, it's family like mine and family like yours that will suffer. We need change. We've elected nothing but Conservatives here for as long as people can remember. So I think it's time for change. Labour, behind the Conservatives, as close as we can get. Let's push them here. Let's vote for Labour Party. Vote for me as your candidate, as someone who understands what it's like to live around here. And let's vote for change at the next election. Thank you.
Joy, just before you begin, could I say that I know that there's a bit of a hum in the room, and if we could just move a little bit closer to the microphones, or move the microphones maybe a little bit closer to you, it might stop that happening. Thank you very much. I'm so sorry. There we go. That was the timer for you, Matthew.
The quickest introduction ever. My name is Joy Morrissey. Good evening, and it has been an honor to serve as your Member of Parliament these past few years, and it's an honor to see you tonight instead of being in the pub, so I do feel honored that you have made the effort to be here and respecting the democratic process. And I have loved serving as your Member of Parliament. You can tell by my accent I wasn't born here, but my heart and my mind will always be British. And I love Marlow, all things Marlow, from Marlow High Street, Marlow Regatta, Wild Marlow. We've had the Rotary Club, the Round Table, all of the groups that make Marlow what it is. And I want to say a special thank you to the residents of Marlow for what you did during the pandemic. You took care of the most vulnerable. You were always making yourselves available. And I will never forget how you opened your hearts and your houses to Ukrainian refugees during the war. It was an incredible amount of generosity shown by the people of Marlow, and I will never forget that. In 2019, I made a series of promises to the people of Marlow. I promised I would move to the constituency, and I did. I bought a house in the constituency. I couldn't afford Marlow, I tried, but I went to another part of the constituency. But I love living here, and it was something that the previous MP never did in 22 years. I said I would move here, and I did. And I understand the pressures of mortgages and the cost of living, because I'm experiencing it every day. And I said I would defend the Greenbelt, and I have. And I have opposed the Marlow Film Studio from day one in every single one of its planning applications, working alongside Save Marlow Greenbelt and other local residents. I will continue to fight for the Greenbelt. If you have a Labour government, it is going to turn into that gray space, and I want to be your loud local champion fighting for the Greenbelt for years to come. I do have a track record of opposing development, commercial development on Greenbelt across the constituency, and it's a record that no other candidate on this stage can match. I have done what I said. I have honored my commitment to protect the Greenbelt. I also said I would stand up for grammar schools, and I have done that. I believe in selective education and having parental choice, and I believe in parents having the right to choose where they go to school, where they send their children to school. We have incredible schools here in Marlow. We have Great Marlow, which is an amazing secondary school. We have Borlays. I was a trustee there, and I think it's such an important thing that we need to protect for the future. It's It's probably why I couldn't afford to get a place here in Marlow to begin with. And I have also honored my commitment to stand up for local people. I joined the local Little Marlow Sewage Action Group, and we were able to pressure and hold Thames Water to account. We now have the Little Marlow Sewage waste area in the 5-year plan for what's going to happen in terms of upgrades for the area. It's meant to be done in 2027, but we need those overflows, that storm overflow, actually refurbished and ready and fit for the future. This has been 3 years in the making. We have been lobbying government. We've been working together with local activists, trying to fight to make sure that this issue is taken care of. I believe in being a loud local voice for my constituents, and that's why we also saved Marlow Fire Station, and making sure that that fire station is fit for the future as well, and those services remain here in Marlow. I have done what I said I would do for the people of Marlow. I have kept my promises, and if I'm elected again, I will be your strong local voice in Parliament again. Thank you.
John.
Good evening, Marlow. I live in upriver in Remenham, a stone's throw from Bucks. I've lived in the Thames Valley for 65 years. I had a factory in my office in Marlow. I've been a councillor for 25 years, leader of a Woking borough, and after a career of turning around companies for myself and others. Have you noticed that nothing works anymore? Sewage in the river, GP appointments, NHS waiting lists, doctors on permanent strike, school buildings falling to pieces, public bodies ineffective, working from home, trains always on strike, roads getting worse, law and order deteriorating rapidly, minor crime no longer a police matter, knife crime soaring. Jews walk in fear of us in our cities. Just Oil and animal rights cause mayhem. You might have seen Just Oil in Stonehenge today. The police just look on. The Horizon and blood scandals. And so it goes on and on and on and on and on. Pretty depressing. And there is a war in Europe for which we are singly unprepared. And we're broke. Skint. This is not a recent phenomenon. Since 1990, we've been ruled by a left-wing, left-right neoliberal consensus. Our GDP is only growing because the population is growing. 1 in 30 people in the UK came in the last 2 years. There is and has been hardly any difference between Labour or Conservatives. The policy is to manage decline. So why vote for continuous failure? Nothing will change. Conservatives broken our nation. Labour has and will bankrupt it again. Liberal Democrats will infantilize it. We are considerably poorer, less free, less protected. We need to radically change the political landscape, to return to common sense government, to return pride in our nation, to ensure that we govern for the majority, not for small, highly vocal minorities. We actually need reform. 5 core pledges. Non-essential immigration frozen, which would boost wages, protect public services, end the housing crisis, and cut crime. Illegal migrants detained and deported. Migrants in small boats will be picked up and taken back to France. No NHS waiting lists. Still NHS free at the point of delivery. Healthcare needs reform to improve outcomes. Tax breaks for doctors and nurses to tackle the staffing crisis. Lift the income tax threshold to 20k. Save the lowest paid £1,500 per year. Take 7 million out of income tax. Make work pay and get people off benefits. and scrap energy levies and net zero. It would slash energy bills, save each household £500 per year, and beat the cost of living crisis, and unleash real economic growth. Thank you for listening.
Hello.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for inviting me this evening. It's a pleasure to be here. For the few of you that I haven't met before, I'm Anna Crabtree, and I'm your Liberal Democrat candidate for the general election. I've lived in this constituency, in Little Marlow and Bourne End, for the last 8 years and have been heavily involved in the local community. My children are at school in Marlow. I'm a parish councillor in Little Marlow, and I've been a school governor at Holy Trinity. I currently chair the Resources Committee for the board of Buckinghamshire New University, which fits well with my professional background as an accountant. And I joined the Lib Dems because I felt let down by our Conservative government. Over the last decade, it really has felt as if the Conservatives have broken Britain. They have destroyed trust in politics. They have crippled our economy and our NHS. They're turning our rivers into sewers, and enough is enough. We need a fresh start and a fair deal for our communities. We deserve a representative who listens to local people and works hard to stand up for what's important to us. I've been heavily involved in campaigning to protect our natural environment against inappropriate greenbelt development. For example, speaking out at last month's Strategic Sites Committee meeting in Aylesbury against the proposed Marlow Film Studio development, which would have throttled access into our town and blighted the lives of those living nearby. And the Lib Dems have been the only party consistently challenging the Conservatives here, fighting 4 sets of local by-elections in this constituency during the last Parliament and either winning council seats or coming a close second every time, while no other party has got more than 10% of the vote. If you feel it's time for a fresh start, I am the only individual here today who can genuinely deliver that change for our area and speak up for you. Thank you.
I will stand up so everyone can see my handsome face. So, in fact, I'll sit down. I realise you can't hear me anyway. Fair enough. So, first of all, I want to say a big thank you for everyone turning out tonight. It's great to see so many people who have given up their time to listen, not just to me, but all the other candidates. I also want to thank all of the people who have made this night possible and organising it, and thanks Angela for accommodating this speech. I want to address why I'm standing as an independent, and the reason why I'm standing is because I believe no political party represents myself. And I think a lot of you in here also think the same. We see so many issues with our roads, our networks. We see multiple white lines painted around potholes with no filling at all. We're seeing third-party companies ripping off our council by filling in those potholes with cheap quality materials. And we're seeing loads of GP appointments. Sorry, we're not seeing so many GP appointments, so you're unable to see your doctor more quickly. I believe it's time for change. And we hear change a lot, don't we? We hear change a lot. And there's always arguments between Conservative and Labour. It's all we hear in Parliament, in here tonight. There's no doubt it's going to happen. But you want the change, and you've been promised that for many, many years. And that's why I think you should be voting myself, Cole Caesar, as the independent candidate, because I would have your thoughts and your worries to heart to represent your voices in Parliament. A lot of people think an independent's a wasteful vote, just like many other political parties, like Dominic in the Green Party. But you can make a change in your community by voting someone different, and you're just going to vote exactly the same policies with false promises by these political parties, because that is what they do. They give you the promises without actually giving you the solution, the ideas or the funding and how it's going to appear. And that is why tonight I'm going to do something different. I am not going to compare myself with any other candidate. I am going to give you my ideas, my solutions, and that is the end of it. Because that is what people want to hear now. They're fed up with politicians arguing, and you're going to see it again, as I said before, here tonight. And that's why I think you should vote myself in the general election on the 4th of July. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Pippa Allen, and I just want to say it's great to be back in this lovely church. I've attended many fantastic music evenings here, and it's a fantastic venue. Thank you very much for turning out. Thank you to the organisers. I just want to give you a little bit of background about me, why I'm standing. So I am genuinely local. I decided to stand here because I think I have a meaningful connection with the area and its residents. Having grown up in Bourne End, I attended High March School in Beaconsfield and then went on to Wickham High in the grammar school, state schools. I was even married back, not in this church, but in St. Peter's in Marlow. And until very recently, I ran a local Citizens Advice office in a neighbouring constituency, Citizens Advice East Berkshire, over in Maidenhead, Slough and Bracknell. I absolutely love this part of the Thames Valley, and I enjoy wild swimming, rowing and walking the towpaths of this really beautiful stretch of the river, and I've done so for many, many years. So I'm a qualified solicitor. I specialise in social justice. I have worked for Citizens Advice charities for most of my career, working my way up from volunteer advisor to CEO, dedicating my career to helping people resolve their everyday problems, campaigning for social justice, and lobbying for policy improvements. I've also specialised in housing law, working as a legal aid housing lawyer, discrimination law in employment and goods and services, and also some public law too. I'm also a seasoned campaigner. I champion social enterprise and initiatives for positive change and have experience of successfully campaigning at grassroots level and beyond. Campaigns that I've worked on include the successful No More Page 3 campaign, helping set up and volunteering as a trustee for a charity arts organisation in a deprived area, and challenging disability discrimination by the Department of Work and Pensions. So the reason I'm standing, we hear a lot about tactical voting, which I think is a complete waste of time. When you're left with voting for the least worst option, something has gone very, very wrong. I felt politically homeless. I felt we needed a real alternative, and I decided to stand, to give people a chance for real change away from the broken two-party system and the limitations which that brings, which I believe is completely broken. So that's why I've decided to stand. And also as an independent, I have a USP, which is I am independent. I am not ruled by a party. I work for you, not a political party. And so a lot of people say, so as an independent, what's your manifesto? I've not seen anything published. Well, I'm an independent. My manifesto is what's important to you. You come to me, tell me what's important, and I will talk to you, discuss the issues, and then stand up for what you believe in. What I stand for is real representation for constituents. I plan to publicise upcoming debates and votes in Parliament so that constituents are better informed about what's going on there. I think Parliament is far too remote. We don't know what's going on there. And as an independent MP, as I've said, I will not be told how to vote by party whips, and if elected, I will be accountable only to my constituents. I stand for holding the government to account, to help prevent government overreach and loss of freedoms, like free speech, digital ID, or future pandemic responses. All of these issues and more require proper scrutiny and debate in Parliament, which I don't think happens at the moment. I stand for prioritising our environment. As I said, I'm a wild swimmer and a long-standing environmental supporter. I am, of course, against greenbelt development, sewage in our rivers, and other important environmental issues that directly impact us here in the local vicinity. I also stand for defending women's rights, particularly single-sex services. Thank you. I think all candidates should be able to recognise and speak about the importance of sex-based rights and be free to define what a woman is. I think there's been a lot of confusion with some of the parties. They don't seem to know what a woman is, and they certainly don't feel brave enough to stand up and say it in public. Single-sex services impact us every day in places like hospital wards, clubs like Girl Guiding, participation in sports, and services like refuges and rape crisis centres. So I stand for domestic priorities. We're being dragged into more wars than ever before and spending our hard-earned taxes on arms abroad, rather than focusing on domestic issues and improving lives locally. I think there hasn't been enough focus on foreign policy in this election, and I think the main parties really need to get their act together on this. And I also stand for young people. I think young people face an awful lot of uncertainty and anxiety, and I would like to focus on positive engagement for the next generation to offer them the opportunities I had growing up here in this amazing place. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much to all of you. I'm going to put some constituencies' questions to you, and can I just remind you all that in order to get through all of these, I would like it if you can keep these answers as brief as possible. I appreciate it's difficult because we're looking at some very big, weighty issues, but if you can do that, I would really appreciate it. Dominic, I was going to ask if we can start with you and work our way along, and then from the next question, we'll move it along to Matt and so on, so that everybody gets a chance of going first, and perhaps nearly all of you get a chance to go at the end as well. The first question is on social care, and the question is, what do you intend to do for the care sector, and how would your party bring relief to unpaid carers who are suffering great stress, both emotionally and financially?
Well, I mean, I suppose the biggest thing is that the Green Party is committed to £20 billion injection of cash into the NHS, which will relieve some of the pressure on social care. Now, I'm going to drag most questions back to climate change, and you're going to have to forgive me for that, because that is my role here. I'm going to point out that my mum, she's 88, she has a real fear at the moment of the high temperature related illnesses in the elderly and the most vulnerable people. She's worried about whether adverse weather would possibly affect the availability of support for her. I acknowledge that we have an aging population and this is only going to get worse, and that spending is 3% lower than it was in 2010. So the Green Party, and with my conscience, would invest in social care.
Thank you, Matt.
I am an unpaid carer. Me and my wife care for our son. We get support from that, from social care. Sorry, I am an unpaid carer. My disabled son means that me and my wife both care for our son. He requires 24/7 support. So there's not really an issue that's closer to home than this for me, really. And it's hard. It's flipping hard. And during the pandemic, it was even worse. We didn't have access to support. We were really limited. But we managed to juggle caring for Sam and working and looking after our 3 other kids. And let's face it, the social care system, both adult social care and special educational needs, it's falling apart, right? There's a lot of private companies taking money out of the system. We need what Labour is proposing, which is a national care service, which will rationalise care across the country, and over the 5 to 10 year programme that Labour has, actually introduce a service that will raise standards, raise pay. You know, we have a situation where 1 in 7 people in hospital don't need to be. If we can fix social care, we can start to fix our NHS as well. And I mean, I think when it comes to issues like this, we have, as a Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner, who was a care professional. There are people in our party who, right across the Labour Party, have deep experience of this, including myself. And so if you want to kind of look to elect someone who's going to care deeply about social care and help fix what is a broken system, then vote for Labour and vote for me. Thank you.
So I spoke on the health and adult social care bill that was in Parliament, and I actually asked for greater provision for out-of-hospital care provision for not just unpaid carers, but just in general. When someone leaves the hospital, where it really breaks down is in care provision in the home. And it isn't just in social care with the council, it's also with NHS provision. And we take care of my mother-in-law who has had 3 strokes, and so having to interface with the care system all the time, seeing where it breaks down, and where it breaks down with constituents is in that out-of-hospital care provision. And also during the pandemic, one of the things that I did campaign for was for disabled residents who go into hospital to be able to have a care advocate. At the time, they weren't allowed to have one, and I argued that it actually wasn't fair for someone who couldn't speak and advocate for themselves to go into hospital and not have that representation. So I fought very hard for that during the pandemic, and we were able to get that installed. But this is an issue where we need power of esteem as well for carers and those that are in adult social care and in the NHS. And if the NHS, it was widened to its statutory responsibility to include more adult social care that could go into co-commissioning with the council, we could deal with a lot of the issues for council's budgeting requirements, but also give the power of esteem to those who are unpaid carers or being paid very low wage within the care sector, because that's what we need moving forward. We need a solution where the NHS and councils are working together hand in hand to tackle this problem outside of hospital care. Thank you.
There is a solution. It's not just a question of throwing money at it, which seems to be the current approach. We have advocated that the first priority is to clear the NHS backlist. And once you've done that, then it filters down the system. We've also advocated increasing the personal allowance to £20,000, which would, in effect, take a whole load of people who are care workers out of the tax system and improve their standard of living materially. Having cleared the backloading in the NHS, there was a piece of work which was done by, I think it's Lord Dilnot, which concluded 2 years ago, which recommended the steps to take to make the care system work. That has sat around for the last 2 or 3 years doing nothing. That piece of work is there. It needs to be implemented, and by implementing it, you get a long-term solution to the care situation. So there are positives. It can be done. It is a management problem more than anything else. I was the first council leader who stopped people from hospital going into care homes during COVID. And I led the revival of our care homes for several years. So that it can be done. It just requires hard work, competent people, and management. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm very proud of the stance that the Lib Dems have been taking on care recently, and I think a lot of people will have heard on the news about Ed Davies' position as a carer himself, both growing up and now with his own children. We have got a national care plan that puts carers right in the centre of what we should be doing to help our society. The Lib Dems are proposing to put £3.7 billion into the care system to help solve the problems that we have and to help support the people who are caring for their loved ones all across the country. And it is one of those situations where we can invest to save. If we spend the right amount of money on care, then we are actually saving money in the NHS and offering individuals the dignity that they deserve to be looked after, often in their own homes. So we're pledging that everybody will be entitled to personal care based on their need rather than their ability to pay. that there will be guaranteed support for people who need relief for care, for people like Matt who say they're caring for their loved ones at home and they need support and they need a break to be able to deliver the care that they want to deliver to their loved ones on a regular basis. And that if we increase the carer's minimum wage, which the Lib Dems are proposing to do, we would also then find that more people wanted to go into the career of caring and we could help look after everybody in our society who needs it. Thank you.
Doesn't like me. So, I want to look at a different approach regarding social care. We all know social care is the problem that's causing kind of a domino effect on the NHS. I want to mainly focus on two things. Now, I haven't got a manifesto. I'm not part of a political party, so I can't change it nationally, but I can certainly raise voices and push for change within Parliament itself. Regarding social care, when it comes to staff shortage and regarding on the basis of people, nurses don't want, we need to encourage people to be a nurse, it's because they have to go through a degree, and a degree is a lot of money. And what I want to do is look at focusing on a scheme that pays for social care nurses that want, people who want to become social care nurses to actually have their degree paid for by the government, on the basis of that they sign up for 5 to 10 years in the social care public system. This would encourage people to come into the system and become a nurse in the social care sector. Now, regarding the care that's currently provided, we have a fragmented market. We have over 20,000 different providers that are providing social care across the country. And what we need to be doing now is looking at the reliable, long-term quality social care services, because we know it's all private sector. I'd love to say tonight that we should make it public, which of course I really want to do, but in reality I can't, and it's going to take years and years, and we need a kind of a short-term process to look at that. So doing this means, with 20,000 different providers means they're all competing against prices, which means the councils are going to look at cheaper options, which means quality of care isn't as good, and that's why we have a problem within our social care. And looking at this and focusing on this and trying to get those long-term good quality care services, then we can start improving our social care. But in general, I think that we should be going to public, kind of like Labour and Lib Dems way, but that's just not a reality at this current moment in time. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, so as John mentioned, the Dilnot report was responsible for reviewing social care, but that was way back when, in 2011. We have had the Care Act that enshrined a lot of the recommendations, and that came in 2014, and that set out a lot of the duties that local authorities have. Social care is something that comes up again and again when people come to Citizens Advice. It's something that they really need help with. They don't understand the assessments, the system. I think it's interesting that the threshold for savings for social care in the assessment is currently £23,250, which is incredibly low. Thankfully, that is going up next year, next October 2025, to £100,000. So that's a step in the right direction. But ultimately, it's about funding. And as I said, the Care Act was 2014, the Dilnot report was 2011. What have the Conservatives been doing all this time? They've had plenty of time to get this sorted out. The Cameron government was going to do it, but somehow didn't get round to it. Theresa May actually tried to address it, bringing in the dementia tax, but that failed. Boris Johnson was going to introduce funding through national insurance contributions, but that was rolled back. Liz Truss wasn't around long enough to do anything, quite frankly. And Rishi Sunak hasn't even gone there. Like John says, 2 years gone by, absolutely nothing. So, what is going to happen? I think definitely funding needs to come from central government. I think that's undisputed. Local authorities are facing a huge black hole. They cannot afford it, and something needs to be done because this is a critical problem for many, many people. Thank you.
Pippa, thank you. Well, the next topic is trust in politics, and I would just like to remind everybody, if they can, try and keep to time. I don't want to have to jump in and stop you in mid-flow, but I am also conscious of the fact that we've got a lot of questions to get through tonight, so I might have to do that, even though it's not my first preference. I would like to start with this question with Matt, and then we'll work our way up. So, Matt, we've had various questions on this, but the overriding question is, why should constituents trust your ethics and your principles? And can you briefly describe the personal values that inspired you to run for this role? So starting with Matt.
Thank you. I understand. I mean, without going into too much detail, while I was at Stoke Mandeville Hospital with my son in intensive care during lockdown, Boris was having parties at Chequers. And I'd be driving past him to visit, well, me and my wife switching over, looking for him in intensive care in Stoke Mandeville. We'd be driving past Chequers. And we were doing our duty. We were isolating. We were having to kind of leave Sam in intensive care for an hour while we switched over on the journey. And all the time, Boris is having dinner parties. So we shouldn't basically, how can we trust politicians? It's depressing that we got to this state. I actually have the advantage of working for some politicians that I did trust. Alistair Darling, I think, was a man of huge integrity. I learned a huge amount from him. He was a man that never shouted at anyone, never got cross with anyone himself, and just served the country in an incredibly tricky situation. So I aspire to be like politicians like Alistair and other politicians, I think, who've just got a deep sense of public service. And I'm doing this because I want the country to change. And I do want trust to be restored in politicians. I do want us to believe that we can have a more hopeful future, because I think that's essential. If we don't come back together as a country, start putting faith in our institutions and faith in our politicians and faith in each other, we have a really bleak future. And I really hope, and many of you won't have read the Labour Party manifesto, but it's a really hopeful document. And it talks in depth about how we need to serve the country. And that's at the heart of this Labour government as it comes in. It's about service, and that's the value. Public service. I was a civil servant. I'm a trustee of a charity. I deeply believe that we need people of integrity in politics who are there to serve people, not to serve themselves. Thank you.
Thank you. And on the back of that, I think no matter what party you belong to, there are wonderful people that serve, that put their constituents first. And it is about serving your constituents, serving your country, and putting those, first your constituents and your country before yourself, and acts of service. And Theresa May said this in her closing speech when she was leaving Parliament, and I think it absolutely is the right approach. And I see it from all different parties, not just, there isn't one party, there are good MPs across the board. And what is great tonight is seeing a democratic representation of independents, all different parties, and you're getting to hear that democratic representation, because I think what's important is that we have a democratic ability to hear, to vote, to make a judgment, and to listen to the will of the people. And why I got into politics, I got into politics to help people. I did humanitarian work in places like Kosovo and Albania, and it unlocked a passion for helping people. And I had a father who was a vicar who believed in put others first before yourself and serve others, and your actions speak louder than words. So I've tried very hard to do what I said I would do in 2019, to honor those local commitments and to be a local champion for the area. And that's what I believe in. Thank you.
Thank you. John.
The question is trust in politics, and if you go back 200 years or 150 years to the Napoleonic Wars, or even 50 years to the last war, there was very little trust in politics then. Our political system is adversarial, and it is designed to extract the truth out of an argument by being adversarial. And therefore it's chaotic, and it's bound to be chaotic. The people who you vote for, you should be able to trust, and otherwise you shouldn't vote for them. I've been in public service, which is a phrase bandied around by everybody, and is dogged at the moment, for 25 years. And I got into it because I wanted to do things for the area in which I lived, and discovered that I could only do them if I became a borough councillor, having been the parish council chairman for 25 years. And then I found that I had to be the leader of the borough council to make it work. And I'm in the same position today. I believe that in the Thames Valley we have a lot of issues, mainly development, green belt, highways, which need to be addressed, and to be addressed forcefully by somebody who's actually done it for the last 25 years. And that's how you get trust in politics, to achieve things. The current inertia in government is the opposite of trust. You trust people to do things for you, not just sit there. Thank you.
Anna.
So the reason that I'm here tonight, as one of you, as a local person, I'm not a career politician. I'm an accountant. I'm a frustrated school mum. I'm a school governor who couldn't make the budgets balance. And I came to the conclusion, the more things that I got involved in, the more I thought, if I want to see improvement in the NHS, if I want to see improvement in the education system we're giving our children, if I want to see improvement in the environment, I need to be prepared to put myself out there and to try and get something done. It struck me when I looked at the date today that it is exactly 1 year to the day since Joy voted not to castigate Boris after the Partygate report was issued. She was one of 7 MPs. She was one of 7 MPs who voted against that bill in Parliament, and I don't think that's representing us. I think we deserve better.
So firstly, regarding politics and trust within politics, I believe that all MPs should have their salaries capped for 5 years and to be reviewed every 5 years. I think that all financial records should be made public of all MPs to the general public. And I believe that it should be a total ban on all MPs to have any second jobs. That includes interviews or whatever, unless it's a political debate. I think this will bring back trust in politics, because we see a lot of behind back doors with a lot of MPs, and that is what I want to campaign against, and I think a lot of people believe in that as well. The reason why I stood in politics, I'm only young. I've got many years ahead of me, and I'm sure you'll see me here in the next general election as well. And it's not me giving up. It's not me giving up. But, people are wary of, a bit concerned, and they obviously want a political party that can change politics as a nationwide thing. But I want to stand because I want to see those changes, and I want to bring back common sense in politics. I'm young. I'm not like Xbox or PlayStation like we see a lot of youngsters these days. I want to make a change in our communities, and that is exactly why I'm standing in this general election. Thank you.
Cole, thank you. Pippa.
Okay, so the party is over. I firmly believe that party politics is fundamentally broken and undemocratic with the 3-line whip system. Thank you. All we see is politicians squabbling, infighting, broken pledges, and self-obsessed dramas, quite frankly. Enough is enough. They come out with meaningless slogans. I mean, like Ed Davey, for example, with his fair deal. I mean, what does that mean? He's never adequately explained that, and now all we see is him doing bizarre sort of it's a knockout carry-ons, and it's odd. I mean, maybe it's comic washing to cover up his part in the post office scandal, maybe. Maybe it's because he thinks women can have a penis. like a lot of the other parties? I don't know, but there's something very wrong with our political system. It's fundamentally broken, and that is why I am standing. I've just seen too many issues working with citizens' advice, and the options that we are able to offer people are getting smaller and smaller and fewer and fewer. And that is why I decided the next logical step was for me to go into politics and change things at parliamentary level. Thank you.
Now, all of the questions that I have today are to all the candidates, apart from this next one. Sorry, Dominic, I'm so sorry. Go ahead, sorry.
Right, and I was about to admit that I had imposter syndrome.
It's totally my fault, Dominic, please go ahead.
So that's totally confirmed that. I mean, I, like a few of you, are probably old enough to remember a few things about the past. And I remember that in 2010 there was a lack of trust in the Labour Party. And I know that in 2014 there's a lack of trust in the Conservative Party. I know that when the Lib Dems were in coalition, there was a betrayal of student tuition fees. And I also know that John was a Conservative for 27 years, as he's very proudly told us, and that he only seems to have abandoned them when the goings got tough. So, I mean, I think Pippa and I would probably agree most strongly that, you know, yeah, Pippa. Is that not Pippa? Yeah, sorry, is that not what I said? Is that not what I said? Oh, I did, yeah. I did say it. Anyway, in the proportional representation is clearly the key. But I'd also go a little bit further than that. I'm a great advocate for national assemblies. So you take the government out of the area and you give the power to the people who know what they're doing. There's lots of experts around here. Why aren't we listening to the experts? There was a particular question. Now, I'm that guy who isn't that quick-witted, so I get my best response when I go home and I'm having a shower and think, oh, that would have been a good thing to say. So this is my one from last time we did these hustings. So there were three individuals who made amazing points, and there were no answers given at the time. There was a woman who had to pay £2,000 a year to send her children from Ivor to Chalfonts to go to school. So I'm not sure where the idea of having choice in education comes from. There was another woman who felt that she had to send her kids to public school. She went out without holidays, all the kind of enriching experiences that young people could have if they were fortunate enough. And there was another woman who was the carer for her grandson who'd been completely let down from the education system. She had to, the young man was only recently diagnosed with autism, and he was depressed and felt like he had little hope. Now, it struck me in my shower moment that wouldn't it have been amazing if actually we could have thought of a school that echoed the fantastic systems that are in Europe that dealt with all those three issues. And I think a neighbourhood assembly could cherry-pick the best of all the things we have, and there's some great ideas that we all have, and they could cherry-pick, and those would be the policies that the politicians would have to listen to.
Dominic, thank you very much indeed. Now, there is a question now that is... I'm not asking any questions on your behalf. I'm asking the questions on your behalf. This is not the BBC asking questions. There's a lot of questions that will be coming from the audience. We have 2 hours here. Half of it is for the questions that have already been sent from constituents, and the other half will be for people in the audience. This is one that's come again from, we had over 100 questions that were sent in, so I think the organisers are doing their very best to be equitable. This question is to Matt and to Anna. Both the Lib Dems and Labour in their promotional literature are showing graphics that, and online, are showing graphics that put their party second to the Conservatives in recent polling. And they also say things that, something similar to only Labour or only Lib Dems can beat the Tories here. So the question that's come from one of our potential voters says, are you sure that your literature is fair, accurate, and within the election rules? Because it's rather confusing for voters. So that one is only going to go to Matt and Anna for the obvious reason that it's just about their parties, if that's okay. Anna, can I take you first?
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to answer this question because I completely believe that everything we put in our literature is accurate. Every bar chart that we have drawn is based on data that I can give you for by-elections that have occurred within this constituency within the last 2 years, and I can provide you with that data afterwards if you don't believe me. But what we have seen is that the MRP polls have really struggled with this area for this election, because in 2019, the Lib Dems stood aside for Dominic Grieve when Dominic Grieve stood as an independent. However, we have spent the last couple of years talking to thousands of voters on the doorstep. I was selected as a candidate over 18 months ago. I've been in the area, I've been talking to people, I've been involved in the politics of this area. And what I am hearing time and again on the doorsteps is that many former Conservative voters don't feel able to vote Conservative this time. And they are not fans of Labour around here, but they are willing to vote for me. So that makes me optimistic that I can deliver the fresh start that we need here in South Buckinghamshire.
It's great to actually be able to answer this question as well, so thank you. The one bar chart I've done is from a YouGov poll. It was exact. I put in the data myself. I didn't even use one of the political programs. I just used a simple program that put the data in. And what that data showed was the Lib Dems behind reform. And what the latest poll out today from YouGov says is Lib Dems behind reform. And this is a constituency that not very long ago UKIP came second in. And so I'm quite serious when I say you have a chance here to vote for a party that will push Joy Morrissey, and that's the Labour Party. If you split the vote, you have a chance that UKIP, now Reform, will come second and will be motivated by that to keep pushing and campaigning. Now, John, I'm sure is an honourable man, but kind of the Reform manifesto or pledge or whatever they've decided, the contract, whichever they've decided to call it, is not particularly well thought through. It will cost us all a lot of money. But beyond that, to be honest, I don't want UKIP to feel like they've got a home here, for Reform to feel like they've got a home here. That is not the progressive, liberal area. And the other point I'd make is that Marlow does feel quite Lib Dem-y, but Marlow is not the constituency. It is not Denham. It is not going all the way down to the borders of Slough. It is not Hotspur. Sure, many of you may feel incredibly passionate as Lib Dems, and that's fantastic. You should vote for the party you believe in, especially in local by-elections if you want to. But the reality is, in this election, Labour has a chance to push the Conservatives. I'm afraid the Lib Dems don't. And actually, the risk of splitting the vote is that we get Reform coming second, and I don't want that to happen. Thank you.
The next question is on the topic of the environment. We've had a lot of questions in on the topic of the environment, which, Dominic, I think hopefully assuages my guilt slightly that I missed you out the last time round. But this one is for Joy to answer first. And it is, how do you propose to address the most important local ecological issues, such as sewage dumping on our waterways and the loss of valuable habitats through development?
So, as your Member of Parliament for the past few years, I have been campaigning on stopping actually and monitoring sewage overflows in our rivers. We have the Little Marlow Sewage Action Group, and under the current changes in legislation, we now have unlimited fines for water companies. We now have 100% monitoring. But what we're doing at a local level is working on a grassroots level to make sure that we're monitoring that level of sewage in the river. And I've been going to the department, to DEFRA, and meeting with them, and then meeting with Thames Water to hold them to account, to make sure that we're at the top of the queue for the new infrastructure that we need for Marlow. We're on a floodplain, we have drainage issues, we have flooding issues, and what we need is infrastructure built into this local area. I've also been campaigning for AOMB land to be expanded not just into Marlow, but also in the Colne Valley Regional Park, and making sure that our biodiversity zones and areas in the Greenbelt are protected. We have Burnham Beaches, and I've been working with Burnham Beaches, Natural England, and the Chiltern Conservation Society to work together to make sure that we have enough protection on our green space. We have the country park in Marlow, working with Wild Marlow. That is an excellent natural resource that I want to protect. I know there was a lot of pressure to put that over for development, but I think it's an important space that we need to protect as a country park so it's available for residents. Those are the things that matter locally, and I have been campaigning on those since I became a member of Parliament. So thank you.
Grateful for the mention in dispatches from Matt, and I'm not entirely sure why you'd vote for anyone of the main parties, but there you go. On the environmental issue, I row every morning, and I have seen the sewage row past me, and I have swum every year for the last 60 years in the river, apart from last year where I just didn't fancy it. So it is a real problem. I monitor the quality of the water every week and send it to British Rowing, who are part of that campaign. In terms of Greenbelt, the thing which distinguishes the home counties from anything else, and particularly Beaconsfield, where there is a huge swathe of green forests and green areas, is the green belt, and it's protected us. And we need to be sure that you have elected an MP who is absolutely certain that they will protect the green belt. The Labour Party will not protect the green belt within their manifesto. It will classify the green belt as a grey belt. So that's a new nomenclature. So on other environmental issues, we've got to be careful about net zero. Net zero will bankrupt us. Net zero is already loading costs on the population, which are huge. They've been going on for some time. And so one has to be cautious of decarbonisation. We will be using fossil fuels till 2050. I think I'm being told to stand down.
I'm just giving you a look.
And a very nice look it is too. So, in conclusion, I've campaigned and worked for the environmental solutions throughout the piece for the last 25 years. Thank you.
I should think most people here this evening are aware that the Lib Dems have taken a very strong stance on sewage dumping. We've got some really specific ideas about what we'd like to do to improve the state of our waterways, starting with creating a blue flag status for rivers in the same way that we have for coastal waters at the moment. We'd like to see the water companies turned into public benefit corporations, so they're not just beholden to their shareholders, but they have a duty to ask the public when they are given the advantage of a monopoly on a service that we all need. We'd like to see Ofwat replaced with a Clean Water Authority to break down that cosy relationship that Ofwat currently have with the water companies. And we'd like to stop the bosses at the water companies receiving bonuses until the sewage dumping in our rivers stops. Just to touch briefly on habitat loss, because I also think that is really important. If you look in the Lib Dem manifesto, there are commitments to restoring habitats such as salt marshes and peatlands and other really important, valuable areas that we have in our country. And that's related to ideas that we would also include planting 60 million new trees, using that as part of our net zero achievement, and also creating 3 new national parks, including one here in the beautiful Chilterns, which I think we would all appreciate.
Pippa, thank you. Cole.
So I want to touch with the Greenbelt firstly. So I actually work in the housing development sector, and it gives me a great insight on how developers get around building on Greenbelts. We have too many loopholes in our system, and especially on the Town and Country Act 1974. What we need to do is be looking at those, and we need to eliminate the NPPF, which is a way developers classify their building as affordable housing, which then pushes the council to accept those developments. Now, what happens very carefully with councils, and a lot of people don't know this, is councils are offered social housing by the developers. They'll give a percentage of their flats or their housing development to the council so that they can use for social housing. Then the councils are obliged to accept that. Now, they won't like me telling you that, but that is the case. And this is why you see a lot of developers, they go to the council, it gets opposed, and then for some reason, it gets accepted the second time round. It's because the developers know the way round, and that's why we have loopholes. And that's something that I want to look at and remove, or try to work with other MPs that obviously want to protect the Greenbelt too in the local area. To be honest with you, with sewage in the rivers, of course, I want to stop that, and I think companies are getting away with too much. I kind of agree with Ofwat, with insurance water companies, with Lib Dems, and I think they should be investing 35% of their profits into infrastructure. They say that, well, the problem we've got with it is we haven't got enough money, it's going to cost a fortune for us to upgrade our sewage systems, but you somehow managed to get billions of pounds of profit over the last year or two of increased on a resident. So I think that money should be spent back in infrastructuring the current sewage system, and that means enforcing legislation on the current system, and that is what I want to do, and I agree with fines, increasing fines, and as well as prosecuting company directors if they're dumping sewage in the rivers as well.
Cole, thank you very much, Pippa.
Thank you. Yeah, I think you don't need to hear any more from me about how I'm against dumping sewage in the river. It's a no-brainer, okay? So, yeah, I would be all for giving regulators bigger teeth to deal with it. I would be all for deprivatization of the water companies, and also make sure they are investing in infrastructure, because, let's face it, they have huge profits. Where does that money go, I wonder? So just to touch on Greenbelt development, I'm interested in the history of local development plans, and a lot of these were formally adopted back in 2019, pre-pandemic. I think a lot's changed since then, and I think we need a review of these local development plans, and we need to review housing stock, and we need to review housing need to see whether the developments that are being suggested on our green belts are actually needed, fit for purpose, and whether or not, or whether they're just speculative opportunities, which I suspect they probably are. But as far as, I just think, as far as declassifying green belt into grey belt, Labour has got it so very wrong. This area has always been green belt. It's green belt for a purpose, and it needs to stay green belt.
Dominic.
Well, as you can imagine, I've got quite a lot to say on this. And I made notes on various different subjects, and it was difficult to put one together for the environment because it spans so many subjects. Every one of the issues that we'll talk about today has a climate, nature, or social justice impact. But let's, John, you said we've got to be careful. We haven't got time to be careful. We have already gone past our Paris Agreement to limit temperature rises to 1.5 degrees. We are at 1.6. If we wait until 2030 to publish all our data, we're going to be getting near to 2. And that makes living on this planet very, very difficult. We had 500 people die in Harge yesterday because of heat-related illnesses. 500 people dying. So I'm just going to give you some startling little things, and you can make up your own mind. I'm not going to go over sewage then. We know that, and the Green Party was quite clear that we would take the water system back into public ownership. So let me just tell you, UK wildlife depletion since 1970 is 19%. That's 19% less wildlife since 1970. There's 43% fewer birds than there were in 1970. I mean, that is startling. So the Green Party would look to expand protected areas and make polluters pay. But in terms of the Green Belt, what I would do, and what the Green Party would advocate, is that you would put the planet on every committee, be that planning or whatever committee, and the planet has to be represented at each of those meetings. And I'll give you a great little example where this is successful. I'm a small business owner, and I'm a part of something called Business Declares, which really pushes businesses to do something about the climate crisis. And one company called, you may know it or not, Faith in Nature, they make bubble bath and stuff like that. But they have put the planet on their board of directors. And that's something that me, as my business, we're doing, and I would advocate that we all do that. So, you know, come and talk to me afterwards. I could go on for ages.
Thank you, Dominic. Matt.
I think, is my mic? No, it's turned on now. There are three things that I'm very proud of that the Labour Party invented in 1945. That's the NHS, that's NATO, and that's the Green Belt. So don't let anyone tell you that the Labour Party don't care about the Green Belt. It's our creation. We created these green spaces around our cities and our towns. And look, on Green Belt, we've been absolutely clear. We will introduce a golden rule, which means that the communities and nature will have to be considered. So when various parties start fear-mongering and telling you that we're going to bulldoze stuff, frankly, don't believe them. Especially don't believe them if they've been the Tory unitary authority here for as long as anyone can remember, the Conservative Member of Parliament, the Conservative government, because 14 years they've been in charge. So they can't fall back on Labour are going to bulldoze stuff. It's just not true. It's our creation and we care for it. And to be quite frank, we talk about it in the abstract. These are the woods and the fields, the rivers, you know, early memories in Burnham Breeches, seeing Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves film there. You know, it is kind of my environment that I grew up in. On sewage, we've been absolutely clear that we are going to be tough on the water companies. In power, Labour will, and if Labour hopefully forms the next government, in power, we will put criminal sanction in against the bosses of the water companies, and we will force Ofwat to hold them to account. We will make sure they don't get bonuses. We're going to be incredibly strict with them and make sure that they clean up the mess that they've created. And on climate, you know, one of my proudest moments was writing a speech that was delivered by my boss at COP, which is the climate conference, because I work for the Commonwealth. That is an organisation full of small states that are falling beneath the ocean right now. I have colleagues whose islands that they grew up on, former colleagues, no longer exist. This is not an abstract. I know the names and the places and the faces of the people who live in these kind of islands and in these countries. I've lived in a climate-affected country. I'm absolutely committed to, you know, to tackling climate change, and so is the Labour government. We're going to introduce green energy, Great British Energy, basically to provide low-cost energy for this country and to meet our climate commitments. And we have promised to act our part on the world stage. And quite frankly, I'm ashamed that this government has stepped back from that. We've stepped back from development and being a leader there. We've stepped back from leadership on climate, and a Labour government will reverse that and will lead the world in tackling climate change and making sure that we have a planet for our kids to live in. Thank you.
Matt, thank you very much. Now, there were also a lot of questions on international issues, and I think that we might hear some of those in the room later. There were also questions much closer to home on the Temple Bridge closure, and again, if anyone's got questions on that, we would welcome them in the room later. But now I think we've got Dave Rooney, who is a local head teacher, who's got a question on special educational needs. Is Dave here? Could you, if you just wait a moment, we'll bring a mic to you.
Yeah. Joy, the provision for special needs children has dwindled to the point where schools can no longer meet the needs over the last 14 years. Therapists no longer visit our schools, speech therapists. This is despite the statutory responsibility in the education healthcare plans. There's not enough specialist schools, there's not enough outreach provision. Locally, there's been an increase of autism diagnosis by 46%. These are issues affecting thousands and thousands of children in every single school. I want to know what your plan is to do to address this and undo what your government has done. Matt, sorry to pull you into this, but expensive gimmicks like free breakfast for every child in primary schools and supervised teeth washing just don't cut it. What are the real policies which are going to make a difference for our children?
Joy.
Thank you for raising that. It is one of the most important issues, and if you are a parent who's struggled to find the SEND provision, it is incredibly challenging, and I'm sorry if you as a parent have had to battle all of that by yourself. And I do a lot of working with constituents as care advocates, and because the SEND, the SEND provision, particularly for us on this border, where we border Berkshire and we're the Oxfordshire sort of sharing of SEND provision, it is incredibly difficult to get the right provision, you're right, for our young people. And I'd say the biggest issue is speech and language, or physiotherapists and also speech and language therapists. And it isn't just for special educational needs, it's across all sectors and in health as well. And it is something that, not to shamelessly nick Cole's suggestion, but actually this is a sector that we are so under-provided for that we actually need to do some radical recruitment of paying for people's education to be able to bring them into the sector and fill those gaps in the market, because we do not have the level of across all of England and actually across the UK, we don't have physiotherapists or speech and language therapists in enough supply for the amount of children that need them, especially coming out of COVID. That was heartbreaking. I worked with the Children's Society trying to get children back in school, and I was horrified at what I found just looking at the statistics of children coming back to school if they were in an abusive, not just with disabled children, but children who were coming from a very unstable environment, and they were losing all their speech and language capacity coming back into school. With the SEND, I did campaign with the Department of Education for 2 years, and we were successful in the bid. It just came before the election was called, so we have been granted a new SEND school for Buckinghamshire. And now I did campaign for this for 2 years through the Department of Education. We have it now, and now I'm campaigning with the council to move it to the south of the county, because I'm desperate for more SEND provision here so that parents don't have to send their child all the way, somewhere that's an hour away. It's so important that we have those local schools. So I did fight very, very hard for this, and it makes all the difference for a parent to have a local school that works for them, particularly with autism. And this is something that I care very, very deeply about, and it was COVID that awoke me to how difficult and all the horrors that were going on with parents managing their care provision by themselves. I was homeschooling my daughter. I failed miserably. I had incredible respect for the teachers, especially after trying to homeschool my daughter. And you must have, thank you for everything that you've done to try to get your child the best care they can have. It is something that I will continue, if I'm reelected, to fight for, because you have to fight for that provision. And I've tried to do as much as I can to fight for provision here in Buckinghamshire, because it's no good to have the provision across the river. We need it locally so parents can send their child to a school that's appropriate in the local area. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Well, I can only do what I can do from what the time from being in since 2019. So, I can only ask for what I have seen, and I think the teachers in our in our local area do a fantastic job and did a fantastic job during COVID. So I am fighting for this. I am trying to get the provision and extra funding for this area. So, and thank you for what you do.
Now, I'm conscious that we've got a lot of questions on in the room. Is there anybody who would like to make a short comment on that? And, please don't feel if everybody comments on everything, we just won't get very many questions done. But Matt, if you would like to, and Anna, please do.
That would be great. As a SEND parent, quite literally a SEND parent who sends his kid to a special school in Bucks, it is hard. And I meet so many parents who are just unsupported by the system, struggling to get diagnosis. Like, the system is not working at the moment, and Labour's totally committed in our manifesto to kind of reviewing the SEND system, putting more money in it. The point about gimmicks, can you not hear me again? Sorry. I will speak much louder and enunciate my words. On gimmicks, it's interesting. I do some work at the moment as part of my day job for a charity in Kenya, and their logo says, hungry kids can't learn. And they are funding breakfast and food feeding programs in Nairobi and feeding hundreds of thousands of kids with huge ambitions to expand it. That's funded by the French government. They're doing it in Nairobi, and yet we've got kids going into our schools who are too hungry to learn. I mean, we should be doing better. And you may call it an expensive gimmick, but I think it's £315 million well spent if we can put the option of breakfast clubs in schools, so that maybe not in Marlow, where kids have breakfast with their parents, but in parts of the country where that's not happening, we are seeing kids being fed so they can learn and thrive in school. But yeah, thank you.
So your microphone's not up.
Okay. I wanted to add on this that the only reason that there is such a challenge at the moment in trying to get the appropriate SEND provision is because the Conservative government have not been funding it properly. I think the Lib Dems have pledged to put more funding into education, to increase the amount we're spending on schools by an amount that exceeds inflation each year for the term of the next government. We need more money going to local authorities to reduce the amount that the local authorities have to pay towards the EHCPs that the SEND children need. And we should also be establishing a new national body for SEND, which will fund support for children with very high needs, because at the moment they are just not being served properly, and I really think that's because we've not been funding it.
Pippa, okay. Okay, if we can have a show of hands, Sarah will be moving around with the microphone, and we'll come to you for questions. Could I just ask one thing? If you've got a question that you'd like to ask a specific member of the panel, if you could put it to them, that would be great. Thank you.
It's for all of the candidates. How do candidates feel about the current voting system? Do they support the existing first past the post, or would they be interested in introducing some form of proportional representation? If so, which version might they support and why?
If we're going to put it to all the candidates, maybe we should start with John, because I think that that would be the next person along the line. Thank you.
I think that's... thank you for the question. The current voting status system we have excludes smaller parties. Therefore, every smaller party is in favour of changing it, almost by definition. And all those people who are in the bigger parties responsible for legislating are against it. There is a word of caution that a lot of continental countries have proportional representation. It's the list system. And essentially, there is no democracy at all, because the people at the top of the list, the people who are the apparatchiks of the parties, stay there all the time and just change jobs. And all that happens is the churn on the top bottom of the list. What we do have in Britain, the United Kingdom, is an ability to chuck you out. So if you don't like me, you can chuck me out. If any form of proportional representation excludes that. So I think it's not very clear which direction we should go in, and at the moment it's best we stay with what we've got because we understand it. Thank you.
Pippa.
So the Liberal Democrats have been very clear that we would like to see proportional representation. I believe that our current first-past-the-post voting system is broken. It's not delivering us government which is safe and stable. You know, we've just seen from our latest government that it doesn't work that way anymore. And frankly, I don't want to be in a category that at the moment has only got Belarus in it as the only other European country that's using this outdated system.
Well, I think a lot of people know my views as an independent. I believe that, again, yeah, I agree with Lib-Dem and here that the first post system does not work. A lot of people, I said, you've got people tactically voting because they believe that the other party will win over to get a current MP out. And this is unfair on us independents and other small parties like the Green Party and new parties that pop up like Reform, and there'll be many more in the future. So I think we need to really look at resolving this and getting away from our current system. But on the basis of that, you know, you talk to a lot of people and you say, who is your local MP? And some people can't even give a name. They'll say Labour or Conservative or Lib Dem. And I'll say, well, you know, but who is the name of your MP? And they don't know. And that is where the system has failed, because everyone should know their local MP. And that's why I think the system does not work. And I would try and look to see if we can potentially change it, which will be very difficult, if I'm honest.
Cole, thank you very much. Pippa.
Yeah, thank you for your question. I mean, this issue has been bubbling for decades, hasn't it? And nothing changes. Obviously, as an independent candidate, I would be for losing first past the post, and I would be for proportional representation. But I agree with John, it needs looking at carefully, but, you know, it's been looked at carefully for years. So, you know, when are we going to get actual change? I don't know. Thank you.
Pippa, thank you. Dominic.
Well, I'm going to be like a little stuck record here because, you know, the Green Party get quite a significant number of votes, but we've only had one MP. We hope that's going to be 4 MPs, but that's not going to represent the number of votes that we get at each election. If we follow John's advice, of course, we'd still be in pre-Enlightenment days, which is what I get the sense that Reform would like us to do. I don't know enough about the different types of PR, I'm afraid. I do remember us having a very modelled vote back in when the Conservatives and Lib Dems were in coalition, and that clearly wasn't explained well enough for us to vote for. But you know, I'd want proportional representation, of course.
Matt and Joy, I know that people will want to hear what you've got to say, but if we could keep it relatively brief from Labour and Conservatives. I know there's lots more questions in the room.
So I think that the constituency system is incredibly important because you do hold an individual who you can find out who they are accountable. And I think actually that kind of accountability is the lifeblood of our democracy. But the Labour Party does recognise that we need to reform politics. A lot of people have lost trust in politics. We will lower the age that you can vote to 16. We're going to reform the House of Lords. Oh, you don't think young people should vote? They should be prosecuted or they can join the army, but they shouldn't be able to vote without sending them to war. We trust someone to drive a car, but not someone to make a democratic choice. Oh, dear me. They can... Anyway, I'm so glad that that was well received by a portion of the audience. What I would say is that I have personal views, but it gets very complicated. Single transferable vote, would that work, would it not? But what we do and will do in government is kind of have a constitutional moment where we start to examine how this country functions at a basic level, including involving city leaders and council leaders in decision making. But Joy.
So when we were in coalition with the Lib Dems, we did give an AV referendum, so that was on proportionate representation. That was a referendum, and I'm sure that if there is a new government, then I'm sure there will be quite a lot of lobbying for another referendum on that issue. However, I do believe that the voting age should stay 18, and I actually think that most young people, when I speak to them, don't even understand that we don't directly elect our prime minister. What I've found is we actually just need basics. Well, no, but I'm just, whatever you think of our system, there is a breakdown with younger people when I speak to them about understanding the basic civic democratic process. And I think no matter what, I want them to participate, and we want them to participate in the process. But if there is misinformation circulating with younger people about how they vote, who they vote for, I think these things are incredibly important. I encourage young people who can't even vote. They're not going to vote Tory, but I want them to participate in the democratic process. That's what's important. They don't have to vote for me, but they should come and choose and vote and make a decision. And that's what's important. Our democratic process, upholding our traditions, and making sure that we're passing them on to the next generation, I think is very important.
Joy, thank you very much. Sarah, do you want to find another questioner?
Thank you. My name's Bernard Gully. A couple of things to the gentleman from Labour. You made a throwaway comment about kids in Marlow eating breakfast with their parents earlier. I work for I help an organisation called Meals for Marlow, and there are a lot of kids around Marlow who don't have the money to eat with their parents. So it just shows to me, sir, that you don't understand the town and the people within it well enough. What I did want to say was ask questions to the gentleman from Reform. Now, as we all know, we had about nearly 900 people from small boats landing yesterday, was it? Today, was it? Okay. Now, there's been a lot of good stuff said, but there's been much less said about how we're going to do it and how we're going to pay for it here, as we'd expect. One of the things you said, sir, was that we'd send them back to France straight away. Now, that sounds great, but I know that the government over the past 14 years has been trying to come to an agreement with the French to do just that, and it hasn't worked. So how would you actually manage to send them straight back to France again?
John, that's to you.
Thank you for that question. It's really very simple. The legislation is already there. The international legislation is already there. 10 years ago, or 15 years ago, we exported for 40,000 migrants. It was under the period of the Labour government. The legislation is there, but the European Court of Human Rights has got teeth in the last 20 years and changed the legal situation in this country. The French are obliged to take their refugees back.
If you put your hands up if you've got a question so Sarah can see you. Thank you very much. I know I can see quite a few at the back.
Just one short question.
And I would like, I'm so sorry, but I think that, John was given an opportunity to answer the question on the stage. We've got a lot of questions in the audience, so I think we do. I mean, it may well be possible for you to talk to John afterwards, but I can see a lot of hands up around the hall.
A quick question I'd like you to answer is, my name is Barry. I was born in Marlow over 80 years ago, and I love the town. But my question is, when I go to a polling station, I have to show ID. What ID do postal voters show?
And would you like to put that question to a specific member of the panel? Perhaps one of you could choose to answer that. I'm just conscious of time. The question is, if you're making a postal vote, do you have to show ID? Pippa, perhaps if you've got an answer to that, that would be sorry. Anna, perhaps would you like to answer that?
Yeah, so is the microphone working? Yes.
Yes.
When you apply for your postal vote, you have to prove that you are who you're saying you are. So you do show ID when you will show proof of address when you set up your postal vote form. But I have to say that showing ID at polling stations was a Conservative idea, which Jacob Rees-Mogg admitted had backfired on the Conservative Party because it makes it harder for people to vote. And actually, it's something the Lib Dems will be taking out of our voting system because there is very little evidence that we have any voter fraud in this country at all.
Anna, thank you for your quick question.
Hi there. Before I ask my question, I just want to comment on something that Joy Morrissey was proud of earlier about advocating for disabled adults in hospital during COVID. I'm the sister and unpaid carer of a Down syndrome lady who got lung cancer during COVID. I had to fight tooth and nail for every single visit she spent in hospital. They would have had her die on her own. So I just want to say, even though you might have thought you were helping, it didn't get through at ground level. So my question actually is that many of us here this evening have tried really hard and failed to meet with you in person. I'm delighted to meet you in person for the very first time today, having requested at least 10 times, and I know other people have tried to find information about your surgeries online. There isn't any. I've spoken to your PA. She tells me you're busy for the foreseeable. I've taken my daughter here up to Westminster to lobby you in Parliament and green carded you. You haven't had the courtesy to come down and tell us that you're unavailable. And yeah, basically, I know at least 5 other people in this room who've had similar problems, so it's a systemic problem. How are we supposed to have our democratic voice heard if we cannot speak to you in person?
I hold regular surgeries. It's very important to me. I held them after David Amos was shot and killed, stabbed to death, and I still do, even though many MPs don't hold in-person surgeries anymore. If you were trying to meet with me about Gaza, there was something that was going to be organized before the general election was called, where we were going to have everybody come into Parliament together. That is an issue that many constituents have very strong opinions about, and I completely respect that. They're very different. Everyone has very diverging opinions on that issue, but it is something that there was quite a lot of lobbying about. But I take meeting constituents very seriously. I don't have to meet constituents in person, but I think it is vital that I have that face-to-face time with them. And the reason I do that is because there is confidential housing casework, confidential casework involving the police, involving vulnerable people that come to see me, and they need to do it in person. I have all of my staff work as caseworkers as well. I don't have a researcher. All of them do casework, and the reason we do it in person is I think it's very important to come and be able to share confidentially with me if there is a serious issue. And there are some very serious issues that have come forward, and that is why I've continued to have those in-person meetings. We have police there because of death threats, because of many MPs like myself receive death threats, and our families do. But I still believe in the democratic process of making myself available for constituents when they want to see me. And particularly when it's a casework issue and it's a complex need issue, I always want to make myself available to speak to them. Thank you.
Joy, thank you very much. Sarah, I think we've got time for a couple more questions from the audience. I'm not in charge of the microphone, I'm afraid, but...
You can ask the question, but I'm holding the mic. Why are you holding the mic? Because the questions are too long. Go ahead, please. Oh, okay. Well, I'm the scientific advisor to the all-party parliamentary group on air pollution. I've been an environmentalist all my life. I've campaigned on global warming for 36 years. I have to say, Dominic, I've never heard of you, but I'm sure you do great work on the climate. I don't support any particular party unless they do something about climate change. I'm not impressed by the Lib Dems because when Ed Davey was in charge of DEC, he had a very undistinguished record. He had 50 advisors from the 6 big energy companies. He didn't have anyone from the renewable industry.
Sir, can we have your question, please?
As for reform, I wouldn't ask them anything about the environment because they're certifiable.
Excuse me, could I ask you, we're very short of time, could I ask you to ask a question, please, rather than... rather than an observation.
So everyone's saying that the future of energy is liquefied natural gas. Could I ask the candidates what they think of that as a bridge to renewables?
Thank you very much. Pippa, could I possibly ask you to answer that if you would like to? We are short of time. I know there's more questions in the room, so please only answer it if you would like to. Perhaps, I'm sure that Dominic has got something to say on this.
I think he has.
Okay, so you clearly have much more expertise than I have. So I would, I know this sound like proper politician bullshit, but I would ask you for help, because the way that I see it is that we need to work to move towards complete eradication of fossil fuel use. We need to use, there's debate about the use of nuclear power. I don't think that that's a reasonable option. There's also the debate about using hydrogen. As you know, it's incredibly complicated, and I'm really sure that you know an awful lot about it than I do. But what is clear from my perspective is if we don't do anything, then the impact is real and the impact is now. I'm sorry if that was too vague for you.
Joy, please.
I think if you're looking at the measure of this and offsetting, I think we do need to look at what the carbon neutrality rate is, and also the supply chain, because I think sometimes we are quick to jump onto a bandwagon and we don't actually know what the supply chain impact is on how that impacts the carbon neutrality. And so I think we actually do need to look at that and see which type of, if it's LNG or liquid petroleum gas, which one has a less impact in terms of their carbon neutrality and also the supply chain involved. And I think it's not as straightforward as people sort of look at it. They're all fossil fuels at the end of the day, and there is a supply chain issue that often goes undiagnosed.
Joy, thank you for that. Matt.
My mic keeps, there we go. Labour has been very explicit that we are going to set up a Great British Energy. We're going to set up a green energy company. And the reason is that you need the state to back and invest in green power, because we do not, this area is not an island. Our country does not survive on its own. The whole of the world's climate is affected, and we need the state to be involved, to be pushing for solutions for our energy, not just for climate change, but so that we're not in hock to Putin every time the gas prices go up. So I think, a state should be involved in setting that up and supporting it. We've funded it. We've shown how we're going to spend our money on that and how it's going to bring down bills for people and how it's actually going to protect us from dependence on foreign gas and oil for them.
John, I think you wanted to make a quick comment.
I think we have to get real about net zero and climate change. We're a tiny little island, and the Chinese are producing a coal-fired power station every week. There's nothing we can do about that, and we can't impoverish ourselves in order to chase a goal which is unattainable on our own. We will be using fossil fuels till 2050, and beyond probably, just because that's what we're doing at the moment. It's not possible to change so quickly. So we really have to look after ourselves, do what's right for ourselves, and then leave it at that. Thank you.
We've decided, because there's so many questions in the audience, if you're all in agreement, that we will allow some more time for questions in the audience rather than summing up. I think, is that something that everyone's happy with? Okay, fantastic. I can see lots of hands up, so Sarah's in charge of the microphone. I'll come back to you later. I didn't realize you wanted to speak.
Joy Morrissey said that she wants the voter age to stay at 18. And she also then said that she wants to encourage younger people to get into politics. This seems kind of a little bit like hypocrisy, But she said that's because younger people don't understand how the system works. Young people won't take interest in learning how the system works unless they have their fair share in the government. So what do the other candidates, other than Joy Morrissey, how do they suggest to get younger people into having their say in the government? As a 16-year-old, this concerns me.
Would anybody like to take that one up? Pippa.
Yeah, so thank you for your question. I think it's a really good point. I think young people, I was talking to a young woman the other day, and young people are turned off politics precisely because they see how our politicians behave in Parliament, which is quite frankly disgracefully. She said to me, that kind of behaviour is exactly the way they are told not to behave in primary school, and they see the politicians behaving like that, and they're just not interested. So I think the politicians have got to pull their socks up and set a much better example, quite frankly.
Would anyone else like to comment from the panel? If
I'll give it a quick go. Sorry, what was your name? John? Joel? Hi, Joel. I mean, clearly, just give 16, 17-year-old the vote. I mean, that's the obvious answer. And I actually don't think all young people, I don't think we can say all young people, because they're not just one big, massive group of people with hoodies. I think lots of them are interested in politics. And I'll give you my one example, which is incredibly pertinent to me, is that my work, I was drifting along I supply new stuff to people, or I did do. I was drifting along this route, just supplying new stuff to people who needed new stuff. And my son, who was 16 at the time, was on the climate strike. I don't know if you remember that. It was a big Greta Thunberg sort of, they propelled children to go to school and say, until you do something, until you take climate change seriously, I'm not going to go to school. And he came back for one of those strikes, and he looked me clean in the eye, and he said, what are you doing about this? And at that moment, I'd say I'm not doing anything about that. But so I then took some advice, and I had a bit of a kind of crisis, and it came back to me that what you can do is influence your network. You can make a difference to the people that you talk to and you people you engage with. And I think young people are incredibly good at that. Thank you.
John Strafford. Politicians love spending the people's money, but we have the highest taxation ever, the highest government spending ever, and the highest amount of government borrowing ever. So could the politicians on the platform tell me where they're going to cut expenditure, please?
Is there anybody specific you'd like to ask that question to, sir?
Oh, the Lib Dems could start off with, or Labour Party.
Thank you. Okay, well, let's put that one first of all then to Pippa and to Matt, and then anyone else who would like to join in. Sorry, to Anna first. Sorry, Anna. Yes,
well, so it's quite a difficult question because I'm not completely convinced that this is really a Lib Dem policy. I think there are a lot of areas that have been underinvested in recent years, and the Lib Dems have a fully costed manifesto because there are areas that we think we need to be investing. We are not talking about raising taxes on the average family. We are not talking about raising taxes on the hard-working people of this country. But what we are saying is that there are particular areas that need fixing. For example, we could really do with more healthcare support for young people in schools, and so we are proposing increasing the digital tax on the large corporations that are causing so many problems for our young people. And by increasing the digital tax from 2% to 6%, we believe we could use that to fund having a healthcare professional in every school in the country. So we have specific policies that relate to particular issues. We've tried to identify where the problems are coming from, make the people that are responsible for those problems pay for them.
Anna, thank you very much. Matt, can I put the same question to you?
So I think the Labour Party's been absolutely clear that we are going to stick within our fiscal rules, and that the foundation of everything we're going to do in government is about economic growth and basically fiscal security. And I think we have costed everything that we're spending. We've been very clear about where we're taking money from and where we'll put it to, unlike the Conservatives, who seem to have just gone on crazy spending splurge during this election campaign. Loads of unfunded tax cuts that they just seem to be throwing out. And so I think the Labour Party actually become the party of fiscal responsible government. And I think that it's a proud tradition. It's a proud tradition that I think we stand on. I mean, if you look at the correlation between economic growth and prosperity, it is a Labour government that delivers for the whole country economic growth and stability. And actually, my point to people here would be, we are not an island in this area. We prosper when the whole country prospers. And that's why we need change, because we need prosperity back in this country. We need economic growth. And that's what the Labour Party is going to be focused on. And if we vote for change here, we get a chance to actually be part of that, about part of delivering a new, kind of more hopeful Britain. So thank you.
Matthew, thank you. Joy, I will come to you, but Cole's going to speak now.
I think it's very simple. Stop the foreign aid that we're sending abroad. Start spending it on the British public. We can then use this on upgrading our NHS, helping the education, SENCO departments within our schools. That's not saying that we shouldn't support nations that are in wars or nations that have got problems abroad, but we need to be sorting ourselves out before we start sending money abroad. And I think it's so simple. We see we're going to save funding here and there. There are other departments that are wasting money. For example, the NHS is paying over £120 million a year on advertising. That could be put back on spending, put back on nurses' salaries. This is simple things that need to be changed within our departments as well as the government's actions.
John, I will come to you, but Joy's going to speak next. Joy.
So any increase in government expenditure is going to result in new taxation, because there is no other way to levy the taxes to pay for these new things. And I just want to say, because it's just irritated me all night, so I'm just going to say it, the Lib Dems have tabled amendments on pretty much every single piece of legislation for the past year on the sewage issue, but magically in their manifesto there isn't a costed £600 million black hole that they've said that's actually how you fix the sewage problem, because it's a sewage overflow problem. It's going to cost $600 billion to pay. So it's all well and good saying this, putting it on an amendment, putting it on every single bill, but when push comes to shove, if you were in coalition again, would it be the same thing as student fees, where, oh my goodness, it costs $600 billion, I guess we're not going to be able to deliver in the end.
John. We've got John is going to speak, and then I've got one last question.
The countries, the industrialized countries who have the fastest growth and the greatest living standards are the ones which are the lowest taxes. We have not cut taxes successfully since Margaret Thatcher was in power, some 35 years ago. Every government has loaded the taxes. Our mission should be to reduce taxation on the population. Currently, we're spending a huge amount in the government every year, and it's spent badly. It's your money spent badly. Yes, we in Reform are committed to reducing taxes.
And we've got one last question.
Yeah. I'd like to ask a question about occupied Palestine. Sorry about throwing in an international question. Many of us are horrified at the atrocities that have been perpetrated against the Palestinians. 15,000 children murdered by the Israeli state over the last 6 months, largely condoned by Western countries, and are delighted that finally the ICC is actually named two Israeli leaders as war criminals. The question to the main candidates is, if these two people are named in the ICC case and attempt to enter the UK, will you support their immediate arrest?
So is that to all the candidates, or is it to anyone individual candidates? Just to the Remain party, John? Sorry, the two main parties, I'm sorry. Okay, so you mean to Joy and to Matt? Okay. Joy, would you like to go first?
Yeah, I need to look at the case. I haven't seen the case, but I'm happy to look at it. We do have an extradition agreement with most countries in terms of if there is criminal prosecution, we do cooperate. So if it would be the Foreign and Commonwealth Office that would handle that, but we do take those things seriously with other foreign countries, but that would be something I'd need to see the actual case before I said anything specifically, because it does depend on a case-by-case basis. But we do honor those agreements in the UK.
It's a fairly big global case issued by the ICC. I don't know why you wouldn't know that.
If anyone came into the UK,
I don't know why you wouldn't know that.
We do deal with that, and when it comes into the UK, it is dealt with, and we do arrest people, and we do cooperate.
These are the people that have been accused of genocide by the ICC. It's not that difficult to say that if they entered UK territory, they should be arrested. Sorry, not a major party.
No. All right, it's fine. Look, I understand people's frustration on this issue particularly. I have been to Israel, I've been to the West Bank. I have friends who've worked on both sides. On the ICC, there are exemptions for diplomatic immunity, but the Labour Party respects the rule of law, and all international bodies, ECHR and all of those types of things, we will respect the rule of law. So if there is a case pending, it will be considered by the government if they come in. And on Gaza more generally, the Labour Party supports the ceasefire. And actually in our manifesto, we've said that we support a path to statehood for Palestine as part of a two-state solution. Because actually, fundamentally, it's appalling what's happened. It's horrifying. It's horrifying for my Jewish friends who have family who've been affected, and it's horrifying when you see the pictures on the TV. And I lived in Burma during the Rohingya genocide and felt utterly powerless. And I think, sorry if I get a bit emotional, I've seen what it means. It's not abstract. It's a thing that kind of moves you deeply to see this kind of the violence of a state. And we need a country, the UK, to be an advocate, a champion internationally for kind of a progressive foreign policy that kind of really fights for the values that the Labour Party holds. And David Lammy's been very clear that we would steer foreign policy in a new direction under a Labour government.
Would you stop selling arms to Israel?
That's a very good question. We have committed to review arms exports in our manifesto.
Yeah, it's not time for that. Again, we're just kicking the can down the road.
We're not in government.
I can see that this
I know,
debate
you can have
could
an
go...
opinion about it, can't you?
I just said
we'll review it at some point.
No, it's not some point.
I'm not in government either, but it's clear that you've got to suspend arms sales to Israel. Have an opinion. Come on.
I have an opinion, and that is
that's what it is.
In government, we'll look at what arms are actually. We don't. I mean.
Look, I'm very aware that this is a very emotive topic and it could be debated all night. We've got to 9:30. We've had 2 hours here. I would like to thank, firstly, the audience. I'd like to thank all of you for coming out and for having such insightful questions. I would also like to thank the church and the organisers because, honestly, they volunteer. They put a lot of time and effort, and I can tell you they put an awful lot of thought into trying to make this the most equitable and fair situation possible. And I know that a lot of people have views on maybe it could have been done better or differently. It's a very difficult thing to do, and I would really like to thank the organisers for putting so much effort into it. So thank you all very much, and thank you to all the candidates for coming and talking to us tonight. Thank you.
And I think we also want to give a huge round of applause to Andrea for giving up her evening and leading us so well. Thank you so much. And thank you again to all of our candidates. We will be praying for you. The next 15 days are going to be busy. We wish you the very best. Thank you guys for coming. Remember to vote on the 4th of July, and God bless you and good evening. Thank you.